All right, let's get into the final pod of the week. I'm joined by the Athletics Manchester football writer Mark Critchley, Paul Ballus, and also Thom Harris as well. All right, Paul, let's start with you. Reluctantly, I'm going to say this because we know Manchester City and we know Pep Guardiola very well over the last few seasons. But how worried should we be, though, considering they lost to Aston Villa last night, about Manchester City's start to the season so far?
I think they should be worried, and that there is a chance. Plus, seeing how Arsenal is going, how Liverpool are overcoming tougher results. I think that City have lost this sort of momentum that they have relied on in the past. The bottom line, I think, is that if you look at the team that won the treble last season, I think that in terms of individuals, City has the worst team this season because they don't have Kevin De Bruyne, and none of the signings, in my opinion, has replaced properly Ilkay Gundogan. And in that terms, City should be worried. At the same time, I would say that the Aston Villa game was the odd thing among the last result. I think that they played quite well against Tottenham, really well against Liverpool. So I saw a different thing against Aston Villa. The game wasn't good enough. And if City are not able to change this mentality and this image that they left at Aston Villa, yes, I think that fans should be worried.
Critch, yeah, it's so interesting, especially with that game last night against Aston Villa. Do you think City have become a little bit complacent? Or is it more towards what Paul was alluding to? The personnel this season just don't match what happened last season, especially with the treble win.
I think this complacency charge has been made against them a couple of times this week. I think Gary Neville mentioned it on commentary during the Tottenham game on Sunday. I was actually doing the live piece for The Athletic, and I was thinking, what am I going to write about this? Because the game is so back and forth, and I ended up mentioning the complacency line in there. Just as yeah, that makes sense. But I think if you looked at that game, it didn't speak to me as a team that was complacent and was taking things for granted. Certainly the first half performance where they were so dominant. It was more the second half where they just drop off a little bit, I felt. And I thought they played better against Liverpool, I thought. But again, not as dominant in the first half as in the second half as they were the first. And then you have the game against Villa last night, which, they just barely laid the glove on them at all. I don't think it's complacency. And I think, you've seen Guardiola speaking this week, that he doesn't think that either. He's pretty forthcoming. He will come out in the press and call his players out, essentially, when he believes that there's complacency in the squad, whether that's on a team level or an individual level. I can think of, several comments against players that he's had over the last few years where he's basically challenged them to step up. But he hasn't felt the need to do that this week. So I don't think that's the root cause. I agree with Paul that the plan that they had that had led to such great success last season, they haven't quite got the same profiles in place now to execute it, and I think that's more what we're seeing out on the pitch at the minute.
Yeah, Thom, prior to that visit to Villa Park, and you alluded to this, City had conceded the fewest shots in the Premier League, yet conceded 22 shots against Aston Villa. You wrote this piece on the game. I mean, why was it so open? What has changed?
I mean, over the past couple of weeks, I think it's been a mixture of things. And obviously, Rodri not being in this game was probably one of the biggest things. And, the solution was to kind of bring John Stones into midfield, to bring Rico Lewis into midfield, and Akanji as well would also step up. But I think Emery had a bit of a plan to exploit that, and that was to bring, for example, John McGinn on the left-hand side, Youri Tielemans on the right. Every time Villa were looking to build up, one of those players, or both, would come inside into the kind of half space, as we call it, the space between the flank and the centre of the pitch. And every single time that ball was on, if it was Pau Torres, who was playing a ball with his left foot up to John McGinn, or if it was Diego Carlos, which actually happened for the goal, who played it up to Tielemans down his channel. And the issue was, from City's perspective, is that every single time that happened, a player, i.e. John Stones, i.e. Manu Akanji, was running towards the receiver to try and intercept the pass. And every single time, John McGinn, who's particularly good at it, he's got quite a low centre of gravity, could just spin away. And once that spin happened, City were exposed, and they had Watkins, they had Bailey running at the back three, and it happened time and time again. And yeah, if you look at the goal, if you look at Leon Bailey's chance after 5 minutes, both came from really similar circumstances. So yeah, like I said before, a bit of adrenaline, but Unai Emery definitely identified the weakness and exploited it.
Yeah, Mark, I'm sort of at the top of this. I'm sort of saying that I'm reluctant to sort of write City off, but who can really? Considering it wasn't until February, especially last season, that City really looked like they were going to challenge for the league. Arsenal obviously dropped off historically, but I guess to expect a team to operate at this insane level, which they have set, by the way, is that an impossible ask? They're looking to get their 4th Premier League in a row. This has never happened ever in the history of the Premier League. I mean, this is insane. It's an insane ask, isn't it?
It is, but I think I come back to your point that you made just there about how it's a standard that they've set and it's a standard that they expect. I think, under Guardiola, second has been nowhere. They've only finished there once since 2018, and that was a season that had some, perhaps some similarities to this one. But look, I think I've been doing this way too long now to write them off. I think we all have, right? Like, I think I saw a quote from Klopp last night saying it's the biggest, to write them off will be the biggest joke in the history of football. And like, we're literally on this podcast in danger of being the punchline if we do that, aren't we? So I think there was a thing last night. Someone put in one of our chats that the Opta supercomputer, their title chances had dropped to 54%. It's 54. Like, if I flip this coin and say heads, then I've still got, there's still more chance of City winning the title. So I don't think we're there yet. But again, last night I think Aston Villa are absolutely outstanding in every department, and it takes that kind of perfect performance, if you like, to make City look that bad. So an anomaly compared to some of the recent games that we've seen, but that's not to say that there aren't some causes for concerns and some worries there as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, before we carry on, I just wanted to let you guys know that if you're watching it on YouTube, and also to those who are listening, if you weren't aware of it already, you can watch all of our episodes full on our YouTube channel. So make sure you head over to that right now. You can see all these guys looking lovely on YouTube right now. And also, don't forget, we've got a lovely interview with Jorginho there as well. So make sure you check it out as well. Right, let's move on to Rodri and his importance. And I think you insinuated this, Thom, earlier. Well, let's talk about Rodri, Thom, because I know you insinuated to this earlier. City have lost 4 games this season without Rodri in the squad. Just how important is he to their title race this season?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we've all seen the stats where the 4 games that he's not been in, we've lost. So I said we. Shouldn't say that.
Are you a City fan?
Yeah.
Come on. Yeah, because I'm coming out now.
Yeah. Calm down. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we've all seen the stats. I mean, it's incredible that City have lost the last 4 games without him. And I was kind of mentioning it before in terms of defensive positioning, but I think on the ball as well, Rodri offers just so much. And there was a particular passage of play yesterday where, I mean, no slight on these guys, Akanji, Stones and Rico Lewis, who were pressing forward. City were on the ball, and there were lots of kind of runs being made into the penalty area. Phil Foden did his classic kind of out to in run to let Kyle Walker bomb forward, but the passes weren't being made, and that is exactly the kind of floated, lofted ball that Rodri can do so well, just to clip it out to the wings, just to get the back 4, moving side to side. And Rodri's so quick at doing that, and he's so accurate and so effective. I think City missed that hugely last night. That's probably, a big chunk of the reason why they only created 2 clear-cut opportunities, because you've not got a player who can move defences like Rodri in this team. John Stones can do it, but not as consistently as, probably one of the best kind of ball-playing midfielders in the world.
I was just thinking about Arsenal and thinking about Declan Rice and the impact he's made there, but also the fact that City have also made 2 signings, Kovacic and the Portuguese player, his name eludes me now. Is it fair to say, Critch, that those 2 players, as effective as they can be, are still not oven ready yet for Manchester City. Do you know what I mean? To be able to replace someone like Rodri when in his absence, that it's going to take a little bit more time for them to understand how City tick and also Guardiola's philosophy.
Yeah, obviously both named on the bench last night, and we've not mentioned Calvin Phillips as well. And we
that's the other name. Yeah,
we just don't mention Calvin Phillips that much anymore. Is the reality of the situation, because he's not really in the conversation to come in and replace Rodri. And look, like I think Kovacic has shown more at the start of the season in moments how his ability and why City were determined to bring him to the club, even if Ilkay Gundogan was going or staying, regardless of that, they wanted him. I think Núñez obviously came in much later in the summer. There was obviously the pursuit of Declan Rice, whether he was first choice. Guardiola's been very complimentary about him in the past. I remember calling him one of the best players in the world when he played against him at Sporting. I was like, who's he even talking about here? Who is this guy? but I don't think he's adapted yet, and I think that's plain for most people to see. Which isn't to say that neither of those players can improve and come to play a part in the future, absolutely. But we're talking about replacing Rodri, who is a player who, look, I think the consensus is he's the best in his position in Europe. He's a guy that's got 360 vision. He knows what's going on at a pitch at all times, in all spaces around him. He's got the physicality as well. It's not easy to replace that type of figure. And yeah, look, I think sometimes a little bit too much is read into the Rodri importance. Like, the stats speak for themselves, obviously, but we're also talking about a 4-game spell here where he's played 390 minutes, right? He was only missing last night, and sometimes that same level of control that we expect from City still hasn't been there with him in the team. So I think it's wider than Rodri maybe, but there's no doubt that walking into Villa Park, the team, the way they're playing at the minute, the style that they play without having him, it was always going to be really difficult for City, I think.
Yeah, Paul, I mean, you've seen Rodri in Spain as well. Why do you think he works so well for Guardiola's system at Manchester City?
Basically, he's a player. I mean, if you can imagine like a player that can be similar than Busquets in the world of football in history, I don't think that you are going to find anything closer than Rodri. And for the way that Pep wants to play, like, historically, he wanted to play with a sole holding midfielder, and now he's using more of a double pivot. But he needs this kind of player that stays in position and that can control everything. A bit of what he was as a footballer himself, and his extension inside the football pitch. And like, starting from the point that I think that we can all agree that there's no one in the world that can be a good replacement for Rodri. I mean, if you have Rodri in the team, you assume that you don't want no one to compete with him, because you want someone to compete with him, but no one to take his spot over, because he's that guy. But apart from Rodri and all the physicality that he adds and all the, like, knowing how to shape himself to get the ball in tighter spaces, which for me was a key against Aston Villa with the sort of pressure that they did inside. City didn't find a way out, basically. And just to earn these extra seconds by shaping your body in the right way just allows you to have that. And just City didn't have it with the Kanji, with the Stones, which are really good at that, but are not perfect. And then I think that this is like the overall problem, because the best replacement that City had for Rodri last season was Ilkay Gundogan, as I was mentioning earlier. And Gundogan is not here anymore. Gundogan is a player that also knew everything in terms of reading the game in the way that Pep wants, and this thing that I was mentioning, like on how to shape himself and everything. And I think that, that City lacked Rodri, but City lacked a lot of power inside. Like, in the internal pocket, City were not good enough. And as Thom was saying, I mean, this is the thing that I think that Unai Emery wanted to exploit, and he did perfectly. So yeah, there's a bit of the element. I think that if City wants to be successful this season, they have to pray that Rodri doesn't miss many games, because he has this type of importance. And yeah, I think that the Aston Villa game showed it, like, in the best possible way than any other of the 4 defeats this season.
Yeah, Thom, I just think about what Paul was saying in terms of, the direct replacement would have been Gundogan, and you're also looking at players like Gundogan that can really control the game. I feel like with players like Doku, City have this much more direct style. How important is Rodri when you've got much more direct players? Attacking wise, you've got, Alvarez, you've got obviously Haaland, and you've got Doku. It gives them that sort of narrowness in a way that they don't hold the ball so much as well. So a player like Rodri, how important is he in that evolution to where City are right now?
Yeah, he brings a balance and he allows other players to do what they do best. And that in and of itself isn't easy. I mean, I remember when City brought Rodri in, it took a really long time actually for him to become that reliable single pivot. I remember there was a game at Carrow Road against Norwich where, essentially every time Rodri was bypassed, Norwich ended up scoring. And that doesn't happen so much anymore because Rodri is so well positioned all of the time. And particularly when he's got John Stones in that holding role with him, there aren't many ways through that midfield to get at the back three. But yeah, as I was saying before, yesterday, because there were so many people rotating in and out of where Rodri normally is, I think it was a lot more chaotic in that midfield, and that allowed Aston Villa to really, really get through to the defence.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't pretend to have this as a I don't want to hit too much on Kovacic or Matheus Nunes because, as Thom was saying, it's sort of normal to see a player coming into City and needing some time just to get adjusted to everything. It's just normal. It's just what happens. At the same time, I think that last night's game also highlights the importance of Jack Grealish. I think that Jack Grealish is possibly the only winger in this team that can offer this sort of control, because we all can agree that Doku is not going to offer this because he's just going to take on his opponent. And I don't think that Phil Foden is either. I think Phil Foden is great, is brilliant, but the sort of the biggest talent that he has is just to being so direct and just a massive threat looking forward, but not this sort of winger that can post the tempo, just find the balance. And I think that Jack Grealish hasn't been this much available this season as well, or when he's been available, he's not been on top form. So he's a player that I think that Man City needs as well, and that sometimes in the past we have overlooked because, nothing much was happening when he was having the ball. But I think that now City are also realizing that this pause is very much needed in the team.
Chris, I was just wondering, are City reliant on the individuals then in that respect? You look at the season without a recognised striker, felt like a really ideal system to a certain degree. Everyone was sort of playing in sync. Whereas you've got someone like Haaland, it's very hard to ignore the presence he offers a team. Doku as well. We could talk about this winger, this erratic dribbler that just does some absolute insane stuff on the field. But then as a collective, perhaps that feels like that's what's lacking, that sort of cohesiveness as a collective.
Yeah, well, I think I kind of instinctively would say that no, that they're not a team of individuals because of everything that we've seen over the last 5-6 years of Guardiola, right? We know how they work. It's based around the system, and you make a good point about that. The 2022 season with kind of false nine, strikerless, and the adaptation that's had to take place. I totally agree with that. I think there has been a change in style in that regard. In I wouldn't say directness, but just they've got more of a focal point now. Certainly with Haaland, I think. I think the kind of PR friendly way of saying it is that I think what Pep wants is so tactically complex that they're very reliant on certain profiles, right, of player. And so if it means that if you don't have somebody with Rodri's ability to know where everything is on the pitch and be that fulcrum and be that pivot, then you're going to struggle. If you don't have John Stones' ability to step into midfield and play alongside Rodri and do a similar job, then again you're going to struggle. I think Paul's point about Grealish is a really good one as well. He's a winger who, the amount of times you see him, he could take on his man, but he cuts back and he plays inside. I mean, a lot of City fans get frustrated with it, but it's all working towards a system, if you like. So I still kind of feel like, yes, they're a system team, but they perhaps just the way with players departing over the last few years and the way that the squad's been built back, they're now more reliant on players who do specific jobs within that system. And so that's maybe the evolution that you've seen over the last couple of seasons.
Okay. Well, let's move over to the man himself, Pep Guardiola. And I know, Paul, you the author of Pep City, the making of a super team. Guardiola sort of admitted that Manchester City are struggling and need to change the dynamic. But also in another conversation, feeling that his team are going to win the Premier League. I mean, that's a big statement. What kind of mind games are happening right now? Do we get a sense that he likes to do this a little bit? Because I even remember last season where he was like, I do not recognise my team. And then, a couple of games later, Manchester City are steamrolling other teams.
Yeah, but I think that Pep knows that the problem yesterday wasn't like an attitude one. I think that when he said this thing that he didn't recognize his team was last season, I think it was in January, February, when his team was really struggling. There was like some dressing room issues with Joe Cancelo and a lot of things happening in there. So he needed to revamp the team. Now, I was in Manchester last week and I spoke to him off the record at some point. And I didn't see him like concerned about the mood inside the team. I mean, he saw the team really involved in his cause and really behind him and really believing that what they were doing was the best to get the best results possible. But yeah, I think that last night was just a football thing and that he needs to catch up, just watch the game again and just reload and tell his players what they can do differently with the sort of players that they have. Just to improve their like results. But I think that as long as there isn't like this attitude lacking that I think that Critch was like mentioning just like before when he was talking about the complacency, I think that Pep is happy. Of course, he's gonna like try to tactically develop his team just to not find himself in the situations that he saw the team last night. But I didn't see at Man City like a dressing room within like the mood inside the team or like how the players fit in. It's just like a concern of like how they have to improve to play better.
Yeah, you're nodding there, Critch. You want to follow on?
I just think, I remember that game last season after the Tottenham game where the Paul references, where he comes out and he says it's the happy flowers thing, and like he wasn't content with the way that the dressing room was and that the players were, approaching games. He wanted them to fight for each other. He was saying how much it annoyed him that that the Tottenham players were picking on Rico Lewis and that sort of thing. When he wants to build that, I hesitate to call it a siege mentality, but this that unity really within the squad. If he feels like it's lacking, he'll come out and say it, and he's done it enough times. So I don't think it's an issue of complacency. I think it is probably the amount of injuries, right? But we've been talking for half an hour. We haven't even mentioned Kevin De Bruyne, right? He's played 20 minutes this season, and just how much of a difference that would make if he was back. Now, I think it remains to be seen whether he's going to come back to his absolute best. Given his age, given he's had a few injuries now over the last few years, but that's a huge factor. Again, Rodri missing for those games, but Stones has barely played that much. Coming back into the team last night after another injury. These are all huge football factors that I think speak to more than any sort of complacency or anything like that.
Yeah, I was just wondering though, and I want to go back to my point at the top, Paul. This would always be a tricky season considering what Manchester City did last season, unprecedented in many respects, right? To get individuals to be firing back again at the same level, it was always going to be tricky, but from a Pep Guardiola perspective, in terms of man management and getting the best out of his team, I can't imagine a better coach to get that out of his team.
Yeah, and I think that he's confident that he can do that. I mean, I don't think that he has a problem or like a worry about like if he can get the best out of this team or just get the motivation out of the team. I think that he's confident with that. But yeah, I mean, in the same way, it's like a challenge for him. I think this is the thing that fires him. I bet that he's going to be like the angriest person in the world today, because when he loses a football game, you barely can speak to him in the very next day. But this is the thing that keeps him ticking, basically. And possibly it's a good moment to have this sort of like dips in form. If like from the City perspective, you want to be sort of optimistic. But yeah, I think that in that regard, Pep won't have like a major problem like with his squad.
Yeah, Tom, I was just thinking actually the unprecedented nature of Manchester City winning their fourth consecutive Premier League title in England. I mean, that's insane, and I think he had a slight dig to Jamie Carragher about that over his comments, Pep. But I mean, Are we over-egging this a little bit? Like of City dropping points. This is a well-oiled machine, well-funded machine as well.
Yeah, I mean, closely related to that is the fact that the 4 games that they have dropped these points in, that, it was Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, Tottenham, who started the season brilliantly, Liverpool and Aston Villa, which probably at the moment is the trickiest away game in the Premier League. And I think we've just become so used to City winning these games and grinding out results however which way that we expect points in these games. It's a tricky run. And again, looking at those individual games, I think yesterday the performance wasn't fantastic, but if Haaland tucks away one of those 2 chances he has in the first half, perhaps the game plays out differently. Haaland also missed a big chance against Tottenham in the first half. The disallowed goal against Liverpool, controversial, that would have made it 2-0. There were moments in those games which could have meant that this 4-game run didn't happen. And then we'd probably be talking about City as walking the league again. So, it's all fine margins, and I don't think Pep will be massively concerned. And also, you've got to say that the run from now until February, March is a lot kinder. A lot of the games now, these last 4 or 5 games have been the tricky ones. And, if there's anybody who can rack up a run of 10, 11, 12 games, picking up almost maximum points, it is Man City. And with Rodri and Stones back as well, I don't think there's massive cause for concern, but obviously Pep Guardiola's standards are so high. Like Paul just said, he's going to be really, really annoyed.
Yeah, I mean, I want to get all your views on this before we wrap up. Is he a victim of his own success? You've got to a point where you're looking at 90-plus points at the end of every season. I mean, this is an insane standard for any human being.
No, it is. I think, look, previous seasons, they offer a guide to what we can expect, but you only have to beat all the teams that are in the same season as you, if you know what I mean. That sounds like such an obvious thing to say, but
I know what you mean.
But I think so. You look this season, 90+ points. Arsenal are currently on pace for that. I think it's like 91. But obviously, the rest are a little far further back from that. And you look at the league table, and it's so kind of concertinaed in that way. I woke up today to everybody making the point that Crisis Club Manchester United are only 3 points behind City, right? So when the league table still looks like, if that doesn't quite make sense to us, I think it still says that we're still quite early in the season. I'd echo a lot of what Thom said there. To be honest, I think nothing really impacts narratives and shifts things in that regard as much as a fixture list. And City have come through 4 really difficult games. And now they've got a run and they're absolutely capable of racking up the type of points and going on the type of run that changes the picture completely. So I would caution against reading too much into the league table at this point. But no, it's a really high standard that they've set over the last few years. I just don't know if it's going to be as high this season in order to win it.
Paul?
I totally agree with that. I think. I honestly think that City will, at some point, get back to this form, and that they will try to get to this series of games, like 10, 12 games. As they were saying, I mean, I don't see any other squad possibly more solid than them, just to expect them to, just to pile up these sort of games. Let's see now how the fixtures go. I think that Luton is a tricky game, if I'm honest. Because Luton has been able to create an atmosphere at their home that I have the feeling that they are gonna get points in there, not in the game, but throughout the season they're gonna get points at home. But apart from that, I think that I think that City have now the perfect excuse and a motivation and a bad place to improve from, just to basically found this streak of games that it's what they need basically.
Yeah.
And yet, Pep has never in his managerial career failed to win 5 domestic league games in a row. So Luton is definitely a big one.
All right, but this is also the Christmas period. Trust me,
true.
These games are coming thick and fast. This is going to be a test of his mettle. Anyway, gents, thanks so much for your time, Mark, Paul, and Thom as well. Do please remember to rate and review the podcast if you're enjoying it. We'll be back next week. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this video, click subscribe for more content like this. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season to bring you the inside track to the biggest stories in football. If you'd like to listen to the full episodes for free, Search the Athletic Football Podcast wherever you get your podcasts from.